What's up, guys? Evan Jarvis here for Grips Poker Training. In this video, you are going to learn how to play poker like a pro by using the preflop checklist, which includes 5 key components. If you're excited to learn, click the subscribe button and join the team, and let's get stacking.
To play or not to play? That is the question. Here's the preflop checklist that's going to cover what factors you should consider outside of just your hand strength when deciding whether or not to play your hand. A lot of beginners only see their hand. They're like, all right, well, I'm going to play ace-king, I'm going to play ace, I'm going to play sevens. There's so much more going on that you need to pay attention to if you want to make good decisions. So the first factor is, what is the action ahead of you? What have the people done who are acting before you in the hand? Have they raised? Have they limped? These things are very important when deciding which hands can be played profitably and which hands that in other circumstances could be profitable are going to be unprofitable hands to play. Second consideration is how many players are left to act. This is also consistent with how good your position is at the table and what the likelihood of you having absolute position throughout the hand is going to be. Are the players left to act loose or tight? Are they passive or aggressive? This is also going to factor into your decision. What is your stack size? It's something that's very important. And to figure that out, you look at the big blind in the game and divide your stack by that amount. So if you're playing 2-5 and you have $400, you have 80 big blinds. If you're playing 1-2 and you have the same $400, now you have 200 big blinds. Your stack size is one of the most important factors in determining which hands can be played profitably. Do you see any physical tells? Physical tells are very helpful when figuring out what people are intending to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about physical tells when we get to that section of the lesson, but for those of you who don't have a lot of experience reading people, you don't need to put too much weight into this. If you're covering points 1, 2, 3, and 5, you should do fine. Finally, the least important of the 5 things on the checklist is what your actual holding is. This may surprise some people, but it's just the way it is. So first question, what is the action ahead and how is it going to impact our play? One of the most common situations when you are in late position is that the pot is going to be raised ahead of you. That means one player has raised and everyone else has folded. In these cases, you want to call with hands that will play well versus the hands they open with. If it's a very tight opener, you want to be seeing the flop with speculative hands like pocket pairs, strong suited connectors. If it's someone who's very loose and plays a lot of hands, then you want to play hands that dominate them. High card hands, big suited hands. Likewise, if you have a hand that you don't want to play multi-way, you want to re-raise that player so that you can isolate them and play a one-on-one pot. By calling the raise, you encourage other people to call as well and create a multi-way pot. And if you have a hand that doesn't want that kind of action, go ahead and re-raise. These will be hands that you want to re-raise for value, like big pairs, ace-king, and maybe some hands you want to do it as a semi-bluff with as well, because you feel that the player who's opening is a weak player who you want to be playing pots with in position. The next type of pot is a limp pot. That means that everyone has just called whatever the size of the big blind is. In these spots, you want to call with hands that play well multi-way. Again, pocket pairs, suited aces fit into this, and sometimes suited connectors. You want to be over-limping with hands that you're comfortable playing a multi-way pot with, and that you don't mind having a small pot pre-flop. With hands that you want to build the pot with, you want to be raising. This accomplishes 2 things. The first is that you'll knock out some of the limpers, making the pot less multi-way, therefore increasing your equity in the hand. And also, you build the pot so that people will be less able to get away from their hands post-flop. When people see a lot of money in the middle, they get a lot more interested in the hand. So if you build a pot and then flop big, you have a much greater likelihood of getting paid off a large amount than you would if the pot was very small going to the flop and people didn't feel committed or tied to the pot in any way. Next situation is when there is a raise and a call ahead of you. In these situations, again, you want to call with hands that play well multi-way and raising fewer hands than you would with a single raiser. This is because when you raise in this situation, there is a chance that both players are going to call your raise. So you still might be playing a multi-way pot. So yeah, you want to call with all those pocket pairs. Now you can definitely call with most of your suited connectors, whereas with a single raiser, you want to be a little more selective about which suited connectors you get in there with. And you want to be re-raising your value hands or hands that you want to try to play a heads-up pot with. And in this case, as well as in the case with the limp pot, the larger you raise, the more likely you are to knock players out. So use that to your advantage, whether you want to raise to triple their bet or quadruple the bet or quintuple the bet. That is going to have an impact on which hands they're going to call you with and which hands they're going to fold to your raise. Okay, next, we have a pot that has been raised and re-raised ahead. In this case, at least one of the players is probably going to have a pretty strong holding, and that's usually going to be the re-raiser. So in this case, you want to raise hands that you are prepared to go all in with. In all games, aces are going to be fine. Kings are usually going to be fine. And against some looser players, it's okay to do this with queens, jacks, tens, and ace-king. You want to have a good read on your opponent, though, and know their play style well if you're going to get all in with these somewhat marginal hands. Re-raising as a bluff requires very specific conditions, and in most cases, in most games, does not need to be implemented. So you only want to call with hands that you are trapping with, and you want to fold pretty much everything else. This means hands like ace-queen, king-queen, pocket eights, they're going in the muck. Just don't think twice about it. In an unopened pot, which means everyone is folded to you, you always want to come in with a raise with any hand that you want to play. This is so that you can start up that triple threat, taking aggression in the hand and giving yourself a chance to win the pot without connecting with the board. If you limp in, generally whoever hits the flop hardest is going to win the pot. Whereas if you come in for a raise, usually you're going to find that the player who has the aggression in the hand is going to be the one who wins the pot unless one flops very strong, which is very tough to do. So again, never open a pot by calling or limping in. Next question. How many players are left to act? How does this impact our decisions? When many players are left to act, you want to only open your strongest holdings. This is because the more cards in play, the more hands that are dealt, the greater the likelihood that someone has a strong hand behind you. Likewise, when you are in late position and you have few players to get through, you can open anything playable because odds are the players in the blinds have trash hands and they're just going to fold to your raise anyway. Also, you're going to be guaranteed position throughout the hand, which is a massive, massive advantage. What kind of players are left to act? If you have aggressive players behind you, or tough players behind you who are going to call your raises or re-raise you, or not fold to your flop bets very easily, you want to err on the side of caution. If it's a close spot where you're unsure if you should raise or just fold, with aggressive players behind, err towards folding. When you have passive players or weak players behind, and you're in a close spot, you want to err towards the size of raising. This is because you want to be playing pots with the weak players and not playing pots with the tough players, if possible. Another big question is, how likely are you to have the best position post-flop? If you will have position, high card hands go up in value a lot, as do hands that can flop equity. This means suited hands, connected hands. It's because when you're in position, you're going to be more able to extract value from your opponents. And also, you're going to be much more able to take down the pot without connecting if your opponents miss the board. And in poker, all these small pots that you take down when no one else connects with the board, they really add up at the end of the night. So don't think that just winning a 5 big blind or a 10 big blind pot is no big deal. It will have a very big impact on your win rate and your results at the end of the night. So anytime you can take down an uncontested pot, that's a good thing. And the times that you will be most likely to take down an uncontested pot are the times when you have position. Next question, what is your stack size? Now, typical stack size in a a cash game is going to be 100 big blinds. So the situations I'm going to look at are when we deviate from that regular 100 big blind situation. So a big point to be aware of is that the deeper you are in stack, the higher your implied odds are post-flop, because for the same small investment pre-flop, there's a lot more you can win after the flop. This means that drawing hands go up in value, because to get a lot of money in, you want to have hands like flushes, straights, full houses, and hands that can only make one pair or top pair go down in value. You want to be a lot more cautious about putting a lot of money in with hands like an overpair, top pair, top kicker, or two pair when you have a lot of money behind to play. So when super deep, suited aces and suited broadways go way up in value. This is because if you get someone in a flush over flush situation where you hold stronger flush, your equity, your chances of winning that pot are 100%. The only time this is not true is when someone has an out to make a straight flush on you. But if it's a flush over flush situation, no straight flush is possible, your chances of winning the pot are 100%. Now, people who are unaware of the importance of stack size are not going to fold when they flop a flush. If someone flops a flush because they play Jack 2 suited, they're going to try to get all the money in. Now, if you're only playing the suited aces and the suited kings, way more often than not, you're going to be the one who has the best flush. And if you can grab someone for 300 big blinds or more, that's amazing. That is a great result, and it's going to be a situation that's hard to get into. So that's why suited aces and broadways are so strong when you're super deep. If you flop the nut flush and someone's giving you action, you can confidently put all your money in and expect to be a big favorite, if not a complete lock on the hand. Big pairs and top pair, top kicker hands should be played cautiously. This is because of reverse implied odds. Similarly, when you're very deep at 200 big blinds, suited connectors and high suited hands go up in value. This is because of the ability to make straights. Again, you're looking to make 5-card hands when you're trying to put in a lot of big blinds into the pot. And the higher your rank of cards, the stronger the straight you can make. Like on a 9-10 jack board, if you have king queen and your opponent has 7-8, you both have straights, but once again, your equity is going to be about 100%. So by sticking with the high-ranking connectors, way more often you're going to be the one flopping the strong end of the straight draw rather than the idiot end of the straight draw, which means you're going to be putting yourself in a profitable position to win a lot of big blinds off your opponents. In deep stack situations, 100 big blinds, every hand can be played profitably, from big pairs to small pairs to suited connectors to suited gappers to you name it. It's all about understanding in which situations they will be profitable and which ones they will be unprofitable. And for those of you who want to get more information about this, please watch the video titled The Triple Threat, which covers optimal spots to get involved in preflop when playing 100 big blind stacks. As you start to get shallow stacked, having 40 to 60 big blinds, big pairs and offsuit high card hands go up in value because reverse implied odds are no longer a big deal. When you're playing with 40 to 60 big blinds, you can comfortably get it in with top pair or better on the flop. And if you get beat, it's a cooler and you can get it back because it's only 40 to 60 big blinds. Whereas when you're deep stacked, if you give away 300 big blinds, it's going to be really hard to find a situation where you can get those big blinds back. So since you have fewer chips behind and it's harder to draw out on someone when they're putting you all in, small pairs and suited connectors lose value. The small pairs lose value because even if you flop a set, you're probably going to have to commit a large percentage of your chips to the pot pre-flop, and that is mathematically unprofitable. When you're very shallow, dealing with 20 big blinds, you're pretty much just going to be going all in. This is the kind of stuff you see in tournament play. So any pair and any big cards are valuable because they have good equity in the range of 30 to 40%, when they get called by a better hand. You're going to be doing a lot of coin flipping. You're going to be just getting all in with this stack. And if you can have a 40% chance of winning or a 50% chance of winning, that's fine. What you want to do is avoid the situations where you have 25% equity or 20% equity. So baby aces, ace rag hands, are not strong hands in this scenario unless you know you're on the button. So again, this factors into position. If you're in late position, you can get all in with a much wider range of holdings than you can if you're raising from early position and have to get through, 8 or 9 players. As stack depth increases, so does the value of being in position. If you're in a tough game, you don't want to open a lot of hands when deep stack players have position on you. Stick with big broadways and big pairs. The deeper you get, the more tight you have to play when out of position. You have to be also much more careful about what hands you're willing to get all in with post-flop. More money to play, stronger hands required for getting all in after the flop. If you're very deep stacked, you have to have the ability to release hands like overpairs, 2 pairs, even weak flushes in some situations when the action dictates that your hand may not be best. So, if you aren't confident in your hand reading abilities, just buy in for 40 to 60 big blinds instead. Then getting it in with an overpair or top pair top kicker is almost always okay, unless maybe you see the flop with 5 or 6 opponents and there's a pretty good likelihood that someone else hit the flop very hard. Now we're going to look at tells a little bit, which is something that's a bit more advanced, but if you understand it, can be extremely profitable. So when someone exhibits a folding tell, you can treat them as an empty seat. Pretend that that player is not at the table and think of your position as getting one position better. Examples of folding tells are when people, look at their cards and just kind of leave them there. They're left kind of messy, or they push them towards the middle of the table. Also, if someone is leaning away from the table, they're showing disinterest in a hand. They're probably planning on folding and just waiting for the action to get to them so they can go ahead and get rid of their cards. When someone exhibits an interest tell, you don't want to open marginal hands because this person is planning to either raise or call your raise or re-raise you. So you don't want to put yourself in an awkward position when you're out of position. You want to consider limping into trap because you know they plan on raising. And you also want to, look at what chips they're grabbing so you can tell how big they're planning to raise if they are going to raise. Examples of interest tells are when someone pulls their cards close to them, organizes them nice and tight. If they put a clamp over their cards, they're holding them, they're protecting them, they don't want to let anything else, move them, generally means they're interested in their hand. And in general, the tighter the grip, the stronger the hand, the more excited this person is about their holding, the more they want to protect that hand and keep it safe. Also, some players use a card protector, which is when they put a chip over their cards. This is also an interest tell, someone showing that they're interested in playing the hand because they're protecting their cards from, the dealer mucking them accidentally or someone messing with their cards. This tell, though, isn't the most reliable because a lot of people will, what we say, cap their cards, put a card protector on top of their hand, every hand. So the only time this tell is really reliable is if it's someone who doesn't normally use a card protector, then suddenly, throws a chip on top of their cards to keep them safe. You want to watch how players react to other players putting in chips. When someone raises, the others will often immediately react to display their intent. This applies when someone has raised. You can often get a read on whether the other players are planning to fold, as we saw with folding tells, call, or re-raise. Let's say you're playing 2-5, someone opens for 15, and player to your left grabs 3 red chips. That player is probably planning on calling. If, however, the player to your left grabs 3 green chips, which are worth 25, that player's probably planning to raise. And if you have a hand like pocket fours that's fine for calling a raise but can't call a re-raise, you can go ahead and dump that hand because you know you're going to get re-raised out of the pot. So pay attention to what chips these players are grabbing behind you and what their intentions are so that you can act accordingly. A note about tells is that they only apply when people are unaware that you're watching them. If people think that you're looking at them, they're going to maybe try to throw a reverse tell at you, and such reads should be less trusted. And also, the more you see a tell, the more consistent the behavior is, the more reliable you can expect it to be. Also, anytime you think you catch a tell on someone, watch the hand to the end and see what cards they turn over and see if your read was correct. If you find that you're getting a read that's very consistent and very reliable, you can now start putting a lot of weight into that. But the simple fact that you saw someone scratch their nose and you think that means they're nervous is not enough to put a lot of weight into your decision based on that tell alone. All right, now let's talk about some cards. Because we're playing a card game. The cards are important. The best hands in No Limit Hold'em are the big pairs and the big suited Broadway hands. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term Broadway, it just means two cards greater than a 10. 10 Jacks Broadway, King 10's Broadway, Ace Queen's Broadway. The tier 1 hands are great because you, on one hand, can get all in preflop with a lot of them pretty confidently and have very good equity. And the non-paired hands are very strong because they make the nut flush or the second nut flush, and they also have the ability to make the Broadway straight, which is the strongest straight in the game. Tier 1 hands can generally be open from any position and can take action. If there's a raise ahead of you, you're still going to be fine getting in there with the tier 1 hands. And facing a raise and a re-raise, some of the tier 1 hands are still plenty good to play. Tier 2 hands are the medium pairs, the other suited aces, strong suited connectors. T9S plus means 10-9 suited or better, so that's 10-9 suited, Jack-10 suited, Queen-Jack suited, King-Queen suited. And BWs means Broadways suited. These hands can be opened if you're dealing with an unraised pot. In some cases, can be re-raised to isolate players, and in a lot of cases are good for calling a raise and playing a multi-way pot. Basically, with tier 2 hands, you can do a lot of different things and have a lot of flexibility in terms of getting into profitable situations with them. Tier 3 hands require more specific conditions to be played. They're the smaller pairs, weaker suited connectors, the stronger suited one-gappers, and the offsuit Broadways. Obviously, a lot of these hands are fine for playing small pots. If you're facing a single raise, you want to get in with these hands. But if the action's been raised and re-raised, or likely to get re-raised, these hands should, in general, be thrown away. Also, if you're dealing with an unopened pot and you are in middle position or late position, you can comfortably open the pot with any of these holdings. Tier 4 hands are the remaining suited connectors and the suited one-gappers. Again, these hands require pretty specific conditions to play. Either an unopened pot where you're in late position, a single raised pot where you're guaranteed to be getting multi-way action, not heads-up action, and these hands should not be played in 3-bet pots. Finally, the tier 5 hands are the suited 2-gappers, so an example would be 9-6 suited, 5-2 suited. Suited kings, that's like King 2 suited, queens, Queen 3 suited, and jacks, Jack 4 suited, stuff like that. These hands should generally only be played in late position when everyone else has folded. Occasionally, if you're getting really good multi-way action, or there's a really tight player who's open, you can call with these hands with the intention of cracking them, but you have to be very cautious about your post-flop play. If you flop one pair with these hands, that's not enough to put a lot of money in. You're really looking to flop strong draws that you can be confident with if you make your hand. All other hands should be considered trash, and for the most part should not be played. In cash games, other than regular connectors like 5-4 off and 7-8 off, which I forgot to mention, everything else is garbage and should always be folded. The only time trash hands can really be played is in tournaments when you're stealing the blinds, And given that people are much less quick to release their hands to a blind stealing cash games than they are in tournaments because there's so much money to be played behind, these hands should not be played. All right, and finally, some further considerations, just so you can fine-tune your game a little bit more when getting ready to play a poker session. Pocket pairs, they're a tricky hand that a lot of people don't understand how to play properly. In some games, you can open limp with pocket pairs to encourage multi-way action. If you think your limp is going to start the calling train where 5 or 6 people are going to call behind you, you can go ahead and open limp with them. If people, however, like to raise it up when they see a lot of limpers, these hands should be folded. In general, pocket pairs should be played in multi-way pots unless you are heads up in position with the lead, aka triple threat. Pocket pairs are very hard to play out of position. Do not call more than 12.5% of your stack pre-flop. This is because of implied odds. You're going to flop a set about 1 time in 8, so you want to be able to get paid off enough to make up for all your calls where you miss with pocket pairs. If you're putting in 20% of your stack every time to see a pair, by the time you finally do hit it, even if you get paid off, 100 big blinds, that's not going to make up for all the times that you called and missed. So 12.5% is the maximum. If you can see a flop for 10% or 5% of your chips with a pocket pair, that's great. You want to be cautious, however, about calling raises when you could get squeezed out. That means if someone behind you can re-raise. You really only want to call re-raises, and raises in general too, if you're closing the action and it's multi-way. This would mean if you're calling from like the big blind. So in general, if it's a raise and a call ahead of you and you're in the big blind, you should always just call with your pocket pairs and see the flop. See if you can hit your set and then try to put money in the pot. The only exception is when you have a hand that you're willing to go all in with if your raise gets re-raised. So, if you have aces, you're going to re-raise because if someone raises again, you're going all in. And against a really loose guy, a hand like jacks might be good enough to do this. Against someone who will go all in with any 2 cards, a hand like sevens might be good enough to do this. But unless you're comfortable getting all in with your hand if you get re-raised, you should just call the raise and see the flop before, putting any more money in the pot. Next, we have suited aces and broadways, which are also tricky. They're very powerful hands in deep stacked situations. You can call re-raises with these hands, even if it means you're going to be playing the pot heads up. This is because of their ability to flop really strong draws and a lot of equity, meaning you can have a very good chance of winning the pot when you see the turn in river. Being in position means you can call with the weaker of these hands, and the deeper stacked you are, the wider you can call. So, if you're 300 big blinds deep and you have position, you're calling a raise with ace-2 suited. But if you're only 100 big blinds deep and you're getting 3-bet by a tough player, that hand's going in the muck. When out of position, you generally want to throw away the weaker hands and only call with ace-jack suited and better or king-queen suited. This is because of their ability to not only flop strong draws, but also be able to make top pair 2 ways. Whereas with a hand like ace-5, you can only really make top pair with the ace, and even then you still got to worry about your kicker. When dealing with re-raise pots, you don't want to have to worry about those decisions of whether or not your kicker's good. You want to be able to comfortably get a lot of money in on the flop when you connect with the board. These suited aces and broadways can also be good hands to 4-bet with. That means if someone re-raises your raise, you can then pop them back. This should be done against aggressive players who you don't want to play a 3-bet pot out of position with, and aggressive players who are going to be re-raising with a lot of hands. In most live games, people are only going to be re-raising with premium hands, so you don't have to worry about this. It's more of a consideration for online play where light 3-betting is a pretty prevalent thing. The other reason these hands are good for 4-betting is they have good blocker value. That means that if you have an ace, it decreases the likelihood of someone having an ace by about 50%. And if you think of the hands that people can get all in with pre-flop, Most of them contain an ace or are a big pair. So if you have a king blocker and a jack blocker, or an ace and a queen blocker, that really lowers the chances that your opponent's going to have a strong enough hand to gamble with you and may have to fold to your re-raise. And yeah, one more time I'll just mention, these hands can flop very strong equity, which means, if you catch that board hard in a 3-bet pot with these hands, unless you are extremely deep stacked, your goal should be to get all the money in or make your opponent fold. So fast play these hands. Finally, we have the suited connectors. Suited connectors are one of the trickiest hands to play in holdem. Everyone sees Daniel Negreanu and Gus Hansen playing these hands on TV and thinks, well, hey, if they play small suited cards, I should play small suited cards too. These are professionals. They have a lot of experience playing these hands and they know profitable ways to play them. If you have a good understanding of the game, you can make a lot of money with these hands, but if you're a novice, you're going to find yourself getting into very uncomfortable situations and putting yourself in unprofitable situations. So, like small pairs, you should never call off more than 12.5% of your chips pre-flop. And in general, following a rule of calling no more than 5% of your chips may be better. This is because flopping a flush draw or a straight draw doesn't mean you're just going to win the hand. The same way that if you flop a set, you're probably going to win the hand. You have like 90% equity, maybe 95. Whereas with the draw, you might have 40, you might have 50, and you can extract a lot of value if you hit your hand, but you still have to have enough money behind to have those implied odds. With smaller suited connectors, you have to be cautious with your flush draws. The more players in the pot who see the flop, the higher the odds are that someone will have a bigger flush draw, which is why it's often better to 3-bet with these hands rather than call a raise to give yourself a better chance of playing a heads-up pot, where your draws are much more likely to be live. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't call raises with the small suited connectors. It just means that when the pot gets really multi-way, you're more interested in making a straight or trips than you are making a flush. And if you do make a flush, you might want to consider just calling down rather than trying to get all in. Just because you make a flush or a 5-card poker hand does not mean you have the nuts. You have to pay attention to what hands can beat you and what the odds are that someone has them. And the more people who see the flop, the more likelihood that people have strong holdings. In general, with 100 big blind stacks, if the pot is limp to me, I like to raise suited connectors and gappers rather than call with them. I do this as a semi-bluff because I want to knock out those hands like Jack 2 suited and Queen 4 suited. They can put me in a flush over flush situation, which is going to be unprofitable. With the suited aces, however, I'm likely to just call. My goal is to keep those weak suited hands in so that I can have a chance to cooler people playing any suited hand rather than folding those hands out and giving myself a chance to be in one of those 100% equity situations. And that concludes what you need to think about before deciding whether or not to play your hand. If you follow the information in this guide, you'll, for the most part, be putting yourself in profitable situations and making your decisions after the flop much simpler and much easier to deal with, which, as a beginner, should be your goal in poker. Keep the decisions simple so that you have a much greater chance of making the correct decision.
This presentation was brought to you by Gripst Poker Training, where players become champions with our free poker training program. To collect your free poker training package, visit grips.com/free and take your tournament game to the next level. We also offer a 30-day cash game transformation program to help you fix your broken poker habits for good and turn you into a winning cash game player for life. To learn more about these offers, click on the links in the video description and we will help you get stacking. This has been Evan Jarvis for Grips.com. Take what you learned, go out there, and get stacking.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it educational and entertaining. If you want to join Team Grips, click on that subscribe button and tap that bell to be notified every time a new video goes live. For behind the scenes updates and motivational quotes from my poker journey, follow me on Instagram. And when you're ready to take one step closer to becoming poker's next champion, click on me in 3, 2, 1, and let's get stacking.